Welcome, everyone. We truly appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us for today's webinar on fascinating opportunities and implications within AR, VR, and Metaverse, drawing insights from our conversation with Mike Collins, CEO of Alumni Ventures, Sai Lee, CEO of Emerge, and Nania Ribs, CEO of Trip. I'm Carl Choi, a senior principal at Alumni Ventures and our Deep Tech Fund, and I'm excited to be hosting today's webinar alongside my colleague, Narain Ramsawamy. Before we dive in, I'll begin by providing a few legal disclosures ahead of today's session. We're speaking today about Alumni Ventures and our views of the associated landscape. This presentation is for information purposes only, and it's not an offer to buy or sell securities, which is only made pursuant to the formal offering documents for the fund. Please review important disclosures in the materials provided for the webinar, and you can access those at av-funds.com/disclosures. A few quick housekeeping items. You won't be on camera. You'll be muted throughout the entire presentation, and we're recording this webinar. In the chat, you'll see two links. One of those is to the Alumni Ventures Deep Tech Fund portal. If you're interested in learning more about the Deep Tech Fund and potentially becoming an investor with us, I encourage you to review those materials. You'll also see a second link where you can book time directly on our team's calendar. For today's agenda, I'll start off by giving you a high-level overview of Alumni Ventures and our Deep Tech Fund. And then the bulk of our time is going to be the discussion with our panelists. Let's start with a little bit of context on Alumni Ventures. First, our mission is to democratize access to venture capital. We're here to provide individual investors an entry point to this asset class, which historically has had very strong returns, but also has been extremely difficult to access. Alumni Ventures is America's largest venture firm for individual investors. We have over $1.25 billion raised across all funds, and that comes from over 10,000 investors who trust us with their venture investing. PitchBook has reported that Alumni Ventures was the most active venture capital firm in the US in both 2022 and 2023. We've invested in over 1,300 companies, and across our firm, we have about 130 full-time employees, of which 40 are investing professionals. The Deep Tech Fund is one of the thematically focused funds offered by Alumni Ventures. Our strategy is to build a portfolio of 15 to 20 deep tech investments, and we make those initial investments over a period of 12 to 18 months. The fund holds about 25% of its investable capital in reserves, and we make the following investments in companies that have strong performance in subsequent venture rounds. We create diversification across the deep tech portfolio by investing in different stages, from seed stage all the way through later stage. We invest across different regions, and we also create diversification by investing alongside different lead investors. Our core strategy at Alumni Ventures across all of our funds is to co-investor and invest in rounds that are led by established venture firms. These are firms that have expertise at the particular stage and sectors. The Deep Tech Fund invests broadly and covers high innovation sectors such as AI, space, climate, and quantum computing. The fund is open to all accredited investors and has an investment minimum of $25,000. If you'd like to learn more, click the link provided or visit us at av.bc. We have a highly skilled team of investment professionals who manage the fund, and we're all based out of the Alumni Ventures office in Menlo Park. We're involved in sourcing companies and conducting due diligence. After we invest, we monitor the portfolio and make decisions around continuing to deploy additional capital into our portfolio companies. Just a brief background on me. I come to the role with 15 plus years of investing experience across public equity, startup M&As, and venture capital. My career journey spans over roles at JP Morgan, Riverbed Technology, and Upwork, complemented by academic stints at the University of Waterloo and UC Berkeley. I'm joined by Narain, who is a Stanford engineer turned VC investor with experience at big tech companies as well as startups. Before joining Alumni Ventures, he was part of DCVC, and he's an MBA graduate from Stanford GSB. Our team is led by Matt Kaspari, the managing partner of the Deep Tech Fund, who is a two-time venture-backed founder and CEO in the climate tech space, who brings broad investing experience in frontier technologies. The other co-lead of the fund is Todd McIntyre, who brings over 2 decades of operating experience in early-stage tech ventures, alongside significant roles as a board member, advisor, and investor. We've had a pleasure of backing many amazing startups and teams. The ones we highlight here are just a few examples illustrating the diversity across deep tech companies that you can expect to see as we build out the next deep tech fund. I definitely encourage you to look up these companies, check out their websites, and learn more. They're all doing very amazing work to make an impact in the world. But in the interest of time, let's move right into today's discussion. And today we're honored to have three distinguished panelists. I'm delighted to introduce Mike Collins, co-founder and CEO of Alumni Ventures. Mike brings to the table an unparalleled breadth of experience in venture capital. His journey includes roles in angel investing, initiating new business and product launches, as well as leading innovation tech consulting. He launched AV's first alumni fund, Green Day Ventures, with the Dartmouth community, where he oversaw the portfolio as the managing partner before growing Alumni Ventures to become the America's largest VC firm for individual investors. Mike is also a serial entrepreneur who has started multiple companies and began his career at TA Associates. He's an early adopter of many new technologies, including Apple Vision Pro. Next is Sly, the innovative co-founder of Emerge. With a background as a first-generation American from Singapore and raised in Mississippi, Sly brings a unique perspective to using extended reality to connect people across distances with touch and emotion. Recognized in Forbes 30 Under 30 and part of the World Economic Forum Global Future Council for AR/VR, Sly aims to break down physical and emotional barriers through technology driven by a deep commitment to human connection and environmental conservation. Lastly, we're excited to present Nadia Reeves, the creative founder and CEO of Trip, a leading name in XR wellness. Nadia's journey, blending her love for video games with her practice of meditation, led to the birth of Trip. This innovative platform combines immersive experience with mindfulness, aiming to improve mental and emotional health. With over 15 years in digital distribution, video game technologies, and mobile app development, contributing to significant industry success, Nadia leverages technology for meaningful personal growth. In connection with today's conversation, we've published a blog post delving into various aspects and possibilities of the Apple Vision Pro and augmented reality. I highly recommend visiting our website to explore it further. With that, let's dive in.
Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you to our panelists for being here, and thanks Carl for the introduction. Just a quick intro. Nanea here is the CEO of Trip, has been in the augmented reality, mixed reality space for a while now. We're also joined by Sly Spencer Lee, who is CEO of Emerge. Emerge is a portfolio company of Alumni Ventures. And our third panelist is Mike Collins, CEO of Alumni Ventures. And my name is Naren. I'm a principal at the firm. I'm going to be one of the co-moderators today alongside Carl. And I'll kick off with a few questions and then hand it back to Carl for the second half of this webinar. For those who are less familiar, could you provide an introduction on spatial computing? What does that mean? What does augmented reality mean? And how the Apple Vision Pro enables these two technologies?
Thanks for having us, Naren, Mike, and Carl. Nene and I have known each other for at least over half a decade, so it's cool to be coincidentally the panelist here. I feel way underqualified compared to Nene on this first question, but I'll explain to a fifth grader. Spatial computing is the next evolution past personal computing, where we are very used to with these phones, these computers, these iPads. And the big step with spatial computing, as the name implies, is that it's spatial. You have spatial awareness. You go from a 2D interface to a 3D environment. Right now, that requires headsets like the Apple Vision Pro or the Meta Quest. Ultimately, we and a lot of the industry believe we can get to a non-wearable form factor of spatial computing, such as holograms. But for now, this is the next step in that space.
That's helpful. Thanks for the overview. Nanea, maybe over to you. You've been in the space for a while. Could you give us a brief history of what led us here and what makes today an exciting time for the space?
Yeah, I definitely think we've seen a lot of fits and starts in the rise of virtual reality. I had the good fortune of being a very early investor in Oculus, the founding team and I worked at a cloud gaming company together called Gaikai that Sony ended up acquiring for the PlayStation. And I want to put a pin on that and come back to it later, because I think that one of the big accelerants in the future is going to be driven by the deployment of GPU on the edge. And so our early experience at Gaikai, working with putting GPUs in the cloud and game streaming, now I'm seeing it was actually foundational for a lot of the thinking I have on how the scale out is. But I'm seeing a lot of similarities to the early days when I worked in mobile gaming. At, around 2000, I ran tech at a company called Jammed App Mobile, one of the early mobile gaming companies. And at that time, there were a lot of people saying, no one's ever going to want to play a game on their cell phone. And even when the iPhone came out, there was a lot of resistance, a lot of people saying, I'm not giving up my BlackBerry keyboard. And it took a few iterations before we saw mass market adoption. And with headsets, I think we have seen direct relation to those same kind of narratives, as well as timelines before the market really took off. Apple entering this space is a very significant moment, I think, for the industry. And even though the numbers are small in these early days, it's really helping train us all on how to develop for the platform. And we've seen throughout their history, by version 3, you usually see the takeoff. So for us, we've just been steadily building our footprint as what I believe us to be the leader in XR wellness on the consumer devices. And it's been steady state. It's allowed us to innovate, build out our distribution platform and technology, as well as our AI technology, et cetera. And I think those companies like Emerge and Trip and others who have been there along the way and have started to build an audience and product market fit are really going to be the standouts, just like the early pioneers in mobile were as well.
Right, absolutely. And, as venture capitalists, our job is to try and find what the next technologies, the pioneering technologies are right before they get to that mass
That's
market
right.
adoption stage.
Yeah, and some
so
do
really
it better
exciting
than
time.
others. Some do it better than others, for sure. But yeah, I definitely want to make sure we circle back to what I think is going to happen with the GPU deployment, that AI really will demand, and how spatial will benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on our list for questions later on in the webinar, so we'll definitely come back to it. But on that topic of adoption, maybe over to you, Mike. You've been an early adopter of the Apple Vision Pro. You've seen how technology shifts play out with the iPhone in the past. So what's going through your mind as an investor? And maybe you can also touch on the red car theory here.
I mean, I think it's, I even go back, we talked about the innovation of mobile, but I even go back a couple of other big technology waves. I was a sophomore in college when the first Macintosh came out, and I remember it kind of showing up on my dorm room floor in 1986. And again, thinking it was kind of magic. These were days with typewriters and doing papers and correct type, and it was kind of a toy at the beginning. And everybody felt, that personal computers were not serious products. And saw that again with the internet and mobile, and, and it feels to me like it doesn't always play out. But this, to me, I'm putting in the likely category of being a new foundational platform. And yes, it's very expensive. Yes, it's very kind of covering your face and bulky. But, you know, I think it is also something that one really has to experience versus just think about and describe. So it feels to me like we're at, and whenever Apple comes into a market, to me, it's like the starting gun. And so, you know, I think our job is to always look ahead 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. And it's hard for me to imagine that spatial computing isn't a big part of the mix. And so as an investor, you know, you want to figure out where in the stack you think value will most likely be created, where we can play. Sectors, vertical sectors, where this may go quicker than in other sectors. And then, yes, to your, you know, kind of the red car theory, which is really about having a prepared mind. The idea, the idea is if I said, how many red cars did you go by on your commute to work this morning? You'd have no idea. But if I said, you know, I'm going to pay you $1,000 for every red car, you'd count them up pretty quickly and do it. So part of our job is we don't have to come up with all the great startup ideas. Our job is to have a prepared mind. So when a team pitches us, we have the right questions. We're ready to recognize what we think can be the 1 in 100 investment to back and support and move quickly with a kind of a compelling framework and value proposition to work with that company.
Really interesting inflection point with technology, with both the AI trend sort of converging with this augmented reality spatial computing trend, with Apple entering the market. And Linnea, you highlighted this. In the short term, and this is, you know, opening up to the panel, so feel free to jump in, anyone who has thoughts. You know, we think that gaming and entertainment are going to be the first industries that are going to be revolutionized here. And so could you share your thoughts on where do you agree with that? Where do you see the first impact and user experience paradigm shifts happening?
The thought that the early Meta team had that it was a gaming platform, and I come from the gaming industry, and it's one of the use cases I was very excited about. However, I think they were very surprised by fitness emerging as a category, when people were moving around in headsets where you could experience embodiment and starting to lose weight. And I personally, when we started Trip, I could also see that there was a lot of research that had been done since the 90s on how to use virtual reality in healthcare, and specifically in mental health. And it got me really interested on how you could use the power, the native feature of immersion, to change or support people, change the way they feel and support them. And, you know, we always had this concept at the beginning of Trip when I started pitching it in 2017, and Mayfield led our initial seed round. The idea of adaptive experiences and hyper-personalized experiences. And the reason why we launched on Meta Quest and PlayStation devices, even though they were game focused initially, was because that was the only place there were enough users to help train the foundation for collecting data. And because I had those relationships from the game industry background that I had, I was able to convince them, hey, let's just get, even if a small percentage convert, I'll get the data I need. And they were very surprised by the traction that we got, especially with young men. And 57% male audience. So I think that we also have to keep an open mind that a lot of the early focus, even in mobile, was games, entertainment, content. No one really saw in those early days the gig economy emerging and being facilitated by the transition to mobile, the influencer economy. And I think spatial, you know, we can detect breath patterns and heartbeat, even head movement from the gyroscope being on the head. You can detect a lot of things from pupil measurement changes throughout, cognitive load, stress responses. You think about the way you retain information and training when you experience it in immersive environments, what that will do for the educational system and use cases that we haven't even begun to see come to market yet. So this is where I think there's going to be a major revolution when you combine this with hyper-personalized content, so we're focused on hyper-personalized wellness. Now we launched our AI on our mobile app. We're going to start bringing that into VR and adapting the experiences to how you say you're feeling and what we can detect. And I think it's just very baby stages of thinking what that's going to look like in 5 years from now. As a product focused entrepreneur, I couldn't be more excited. And this is one of the reasons why Sly and I started talking when he first, he got on my radar because one of my favorite devs left to go work for him. And but the idea of how do you create this tactile, this sense of touch that goes beyond just haptic buzzing. So there's a lot more innovation on the horizon, and I know a lot of very talented entrepreneurs and developers are here for that.
Beautiful segue to what we're doing, and I'll plus one what she's saying. I tried Trip for the first time now almost 5 years ago, and I really like your nuance, Nanea, on everyone thought it was going to be gaming. It was so obvious. Yet now, as we look back, the things that have really moved the needle forward, in my opinion, are not the games. And when I tried Trip, it was so different than any other piece of content. At that time, the Oculus, it was just so standout. And that ended up becoming the one app that I continued to use throughout the pandemic, both myself and my wife. It's interesting you mentioned young men. I think what Nanea and I see is actually pretty contrarian to most of the VR experts out there. I actually don't consider myself a VR expert. In many ways, I'm quite skeptical of the industry, and there's been a lot of industry assumptions that have played out incorrect with the Vision Pro launch. And on this topic of what are the breakthrough applications, I think Nanea is totally spot on. Both Nanea's company and our company are riding bigger waves than the technological wave. We're riding waves of society, of what do we want to shape in our kids' generation, in current Gen Z generation, which is the loneliest generation that's ever existed, of the 2 billion lonely people across the pandemic, with both WHO and the US Surgeon General declared a global pandemic. And so technology is just a tool. And there's a lot of assumptions that we think are wrong on what's going to drive this forward. Gaming and entertainment are just really easy answers to throw out there because it's like, oh, duh, like movies, games, my kid plays games. Wellness dwarfs all of these categories. Communication, I'll add in, is a third category, which is what you saw in the Vision Pro launch, also dwarfs gaming and community and entertainment. If you watch the Vision Pro announcement, we dissected it, watched it so many times. A lot of the criticisms of Vision Pro is how few content it's come out with. I think that's actually beautiful. As with most things in life, like simplicity often is the wisdom. If you can pare it down to less, then you truly have an insight into consumer behavior. They launched with, yeah, go ahead, Nanea.
Oh, I was just going to say, it did require a greater demand on the development on the art side because of the fidelity of the headset.
That's right.
Yeah, anything.
And just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I had the interesting fortune to chat with John Favreau this week. We met at an event physically, and we were talking about how he created some of that content for Vision Pro. It's amazing how simple they launched with. They really launched with wellness, as you saw, and what Nanea is pioneering and been pioneering for over a decade. Productivity, with the ability to connect with your laptop, etc. Entertainment, of course, and communication. I saw games as a very small piece of their announcement. They did very little in the games. They have Fruit Ninja on there, which has been around for a few years, and they have chess, which has
I
been
think
there.
the board games are pretty good
The
though.
board games are really
Yeah.
cool.
I think that, some of the innovation people are doing with the pass-through view,
Yes.
it's really interesting. However, when we launched our pass-through reward system on the Oculus, on the Meta Quest Pro device in October, and it had a really big impact on our 7-day average, because repeat usage is still the elephant in the room. And I'm really proud of the fact that Trip and we know the fitness apps as well, but we have long-term engagement. We have frequency of use that is in, quite a few times a week. It's still not daily yet because you're not walking around with the device on your head all day long just yet, but I do believe in a future where we will have these data-driven glasses that are ubiquitous. It does require that GPU processing to exist somewhere else
Yes.
and take a heavier load.
I
And
also,
and exist here.
I mean, for me, I think one of the core messages that I always think about in looking at these kinds of things is just the humility of not being able to predict the future, how this all plays out, right?
Right.
I mean, and how long it can take. I mean, the number of years before, after the iPhone was launched, before, you had an Uber or you had, a TikTok. And, it just, sometimes it takes time and it's going to happen in very, very unpredictable ways.
Yep.
But I think it is a technology where I think a lot of new companies can carve out new businesses. I mean, I think AI, it's actually an interesting question of how much AI will fall to kind of incumbents who just have really unique data sets and customers and now can just kind of turbocharge that relationship with artificial intelligence. For me, spatial computing is more wide open for entrepreneurs to, find a problem that really hasn't been addressed through computing at all.
Right.
And I think it can, yes, I think the answers of, is pretty good at entertainment right now, but I think that puts it in such a narrow, confined box
I totally agree.
versus, we always try to start with, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And, and I think it can go into some commercial applications. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that can be done, just in education and in training and in, real estate. And, there's going to be entrepreneurs who just say, hey, here's a problem where this technology solves it an order of magnitude better than the alternatives.
Yeah.
And, we just don't know what those are yet, but it's surely an exciting platform for entrepreneurs to work on.
Yes, and just getting an understanding of how to develop for it. So going back to that GPU on the edge, though, because that is a necessary thing for spatial to have lighter weight devices. And the good news is there have been major advancements on being able to wear these devices outdoors as well, which, in the past has been not possible. But it's a very interesting, because having developed for apps in the past, games that were streamed, it's a completely different approach to developing an app that a lot of people have not a lot of experience with, which is they're very thin clients on the device that are essentially doing very low latency turnarounds and interpolation with a local GPU, which we know that Qualcomm is shipping this year on their chipset for devices, mobile and headset, to kind of shape traffic. You're dealing with like what happens if the network stutters, et cetera. a much different way to engineer. But AI is going to demand the same vision. And even just audio enabled glasses, like, you know, the Meta Ray-Bans are very successful. And I've tried the Amazon Alexa Echo glasses as well, which are, I mean, the responsiveness is amazing. It's very I can see the utility of it in your day-to-day. And
Absolutely.
there's other ones coming out on the horizon. And so that proliferation of the GPU cloud, as it were, that everyone's working on right now, and even Google has all that infrastructure from the Stadia deployment, we're all going to benefit. It's really, the tide will rise all the boats specific to spatial AI, and that gives us the tools and the building blocks to start really innovating things that once you know, as builders, we know once you start building, it's that conversation that happens internally where you throw things out, you try, you launch little chunks and people interact with it, and you realize, oh my God, we're onto something special, right?
Yeah,
On the
absolutely.
topic that Nene is mentioning on the GPUs, where do they go? It's a really interesting point because a lot of the criticism of this is how large it is. This has to house a really powerful compute module, and it doesn't even have the battery. The battery is separate.
Right.
On the Quest, you have both in one. Apple took it apart. This is a lot of stuff. For this to become the vision that most people want it to become, which is glasses that are as thin as Mike's glasses he has now, there's no way that you can have a computer on board. And what Nene, you're interpolating is, where does it go? And interestingly, around 7 years ago, we filed a patent for our device to become what we called an XR hub at the time. For this device to house the compute and do what's called split rendering. Until about last year, none of these big companies knew what we were talking about or believed that it would become a thing. That changed when Vision Pro came out. Our device not only creates the sensation of touch using sound energy above and around it, we have a pretty powerful compute module in here. We can already allow some headsets to tap into the power of our system and render.
That's cool.
And so as we continue, one of our big hypotheses is that whoever owns that compute module in the home becomes potentially part of the hub or new platform. We don't think it's going to be this, because these things run out of power really quickly. I don't think it's going to be this, right? Because this is for a completely different paradigm. Could it become this? Oh, we think it could, if we provide enough value for the user to buy this today. And that's where we think the sense of touch, comes in. Is really important. Whenever you see something virtually, you just instantly want to feel it. And I'll just say, this is one of our probably biggest contrarian perspectives, is that we believe that spatial computing cannot take off at the order of magnitude of, say, 1 billion users without the sense of touch. We think that the human brain can only compute so much in just with vision and audio without the tactile sense, which is how we all live throughout the world today. We use touch to open a door, pick up our coffee, hug our child. Without touch, we are limited in the amount of brain power we can tap into. So we do think, like the yin and yang, our device or someone's device needs to come online and work hand in hand with this. It's one of the reasons this company reached out to us last year.
Hey everyone, I want to take a quick break so I can tell you a bit about Alumni Ventures and our Deep Tech Fund. We offer smart, simple, and accessible venture portfolios for individual investors. We build diversified portfolios with low minimums, co-investing alongside established lead investors. It's a strategy that has mobilized over $1.3 billion from our community of more than 10,000 investors. With our Deep Tech Fund, you'll have the opportunity to invest in innovative solutions to major technical and scientific challenges, which can have a hugely positive impact on society. The deep tech sector encompasses areas such as AI, energy, quantum computing, semiconductors, space infrastructure, and more. We're committed to backing deep tech companies tackling important, hard problems with innovations that have the potential to redefine industries, create a more sustainable future, and deliver significant financial returns. So if you're interested in a portfolio of revolutionary companies, click the link below or visit us at av.vc.
I had a conversation with a very large telco operator who were doing something, kind of a proof of concept with that was pretty cool. And we were talking to them about accessing the home router in the same way. Is there a way that we could put some GPU on there to access compute when you're in the home? So yeah, again, like there's lots of hardware and software and infrastructure innovation.
Yeah, definitely agree with more collaboration between software and hardware. And perhaps we're just at the beginning of this journey with GPU, compute being just ready, and also a potential marriage of AI and spatial computing. Putting on our investor hat, what are some characteristics would you say for augmented reality startups that we should be most excited about? And how can we spot some early winners?
Well, I raised my hand there. We
Little
worked
bit of a
really
biased
hard.
question.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Nene.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Because
I
you have
mean,
more horizontal view. I'm very biased, right? Because I'm just
yeah, I
down
mean, I'm
in the
biased as
company.
well, but when I think about, I love history. I love history of venture capital, actually. When I was reading the Power Law and studying some of the big companies that made it throughout the day, one of my investors told me this literally this week, 90% of it is just staying alive. Nene and I have both been alive with our company for almost a decade each. It's been
We're 6 years.
about 16 years?
6.
6 years, okay, we've been 9 years. But you've been working on it and the foundations of your company for much longer than 6 years, right? So when I think about, no, okay, so 6 years. So we've been alive for a long time, almost a decade. And so when you look at a lot of the companies that have been near death, last year 3,000 startups closed, and both Nene and I are still here on the call today running our companies. Most of the battle is staying alive long enough to where can you be relevant in the time and place. There's a lot of famous TED Talks around the number one thing with startups being successful out is timing. And can you be in the right place, right time, right data insights, like Nene was saying, we've been gathering the foundational data for the big leap. Do you think the big leap or a big leap is happening in the next, say, 2-year window? So maybe that's one thing that I would look at is staying power and like, has the company shown that persistence through, the 10 downturns we've experienced in the last decade?
I think, Carl, to answer your question, some of the things I think, fitness, obviously, and wellness, we're focusing on the emotional graph and how to support people differently than what they can do on their own. Using technology, I definitely think is an opportunity. The thing that I have not seen a winner, but is an obvious area, is looking at community. When you look at the power of even just FaceTime on the Apple Vision Pro, I did a job interview with my FaceTime avatar in Apple Vision Pro, and it was kind of an interesting experience because one, he felt like he was talking to an angel, the way it makes you appear as an avatar. But I look at some of the killer opportunities with, I was actually having this conversation with Meta around, what a bird in the hand they have with the way WhatsApp can put groups together, reinventing how people come together. Right now, we're little Hollywood squares on Zoom that goes beyond just sort of, cartoon-like avatars run around a virtual space that feels much bigger and is lonely. That to me seems to be where people are. I would look at people who are innovating, companies that are innovating on how to bring people together in communication, in new.
Well, wait till you see what we announce in the future, and it's exactly this.
Yeah, the power of community, as well as Sly's earlier point about staying power, makes a lot of sense. So to you, Mike, you've been in the venture for a long time and have seen a lot of different technologies come and go. So for augmented reality, what are some new trends or new business models you think that could emerge and be a game changer?
a lot of it for me is kind of first principles. Are you solving a problem that really exists? I mean, the technology itself is amazing. It's cool. As I said, you really have to experience it.
Mhm.
But you fundamentally, at the end of the day, you have to solve a problem that someone has, whether that's managing their mental health or, educating a class on something. So you'd never want to lose kind of the distraction of a fancy demo to solving a problem, right? Would be one. I would
Right.
say a couple of other things I'll add to that though, Carl, is with every new technology, there's kind of unintended negative consequences. And for as wonderful as the iPhone smartphone business has been, I think it has contributed to this point of loneliness and isolation and,
Yep.
probably amplified by COVID of people wanting more community. Again, there's been a bunch of communities that have been kind of broken down over time as well. So I think, is there an opportunity with a new platform to improve connectivity? And, I would say right now, like V1 of, the Apple Vision or something, like I think it's a fantastic way to watch a baseball game.
For sure, agree.
But I'm married and I'm not going to sit next to my wife, with my headset on, while she's sitting there still watching a traditional television. So at some point in the future that'll be more of a communal thing. And again, you take some of the experiences of, almost these virtual memories that get created when you use it to create kind of a three-dimensional scene or picture that you almost can walk into,
Right.
which is part of their demo, which is really, until you experience it, pretty compelling, to draw you into an actual place. So again, this is an area where I think fixing some of the problems of previous technologies is always a good place to be an innovator. And so, beyond the normal things, you look for a team with domain expertise, grit, solving a real problem, kind of the normal venture capital stuff. I think you really want to focus on what can this technology platform bring to the table that other things couldn't do. And so, I don't think that's always an obvious quick answer, and it won't necessarily happen easily. But I think there's the potential for that. And I guess my third point, Carl, is I'll just underscore, I think we're when you have a new technology, and this is one of the theories from one of my old professors, Clayton Christensen, which is at the beginning, where the technology is not good enough, which I would argue it is still not.
Mhm.
There's real advantages to being vertically integrated, meaning, and this is one reason you get excited about Apple, because, they go from the chip, they go right up the stack and have innovated with, memory management and cameras and hardware software problems. And, so I would be optimistic that someone like Apple will continue to very rapidly make progress in this space. Now, progress may not be as quick as it was with the iPhone, right?
Right.
Where like the difference between the first phone, the second phone, the third phone, the fourth phone was huge. People lose track of how rapidly that got better over 5 years. And then obviously more recently it slowed. But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, because they really are vertically integrated, that you can really move the platform forward. And then it's really up to the entrepreneur to solve a problem with that platform. And so
Yeah.
that's really what we're looking for, is we're looking for great teams, really committed, that say, you know what, I am going to change, surgery and surgery training, or whatever it happens to be, using this platform. And it gets better. What I will deliver to my customers will get exponentially better.
I want
Yeah.
to touch on something Mike mentioned, which is, this webinar is partially on Vision Pro, and, we're building the world that we want to live in. We're building the world that we want our kids to live in. Mike was saying how this has caused a lot of problems, and it really sadly has. And so when we think about building our product, I know Nene has a similar viewpoint. We want to be very thoughtful in the types of products we put out there for our mental health, for our children, for the next generation. Apple is so good, in my opinion, because they think about the small things that matter. It's not there yet in terms of solve 100% of the problems, but even the thing that Mike mentioned about if he's sitting on the couch with the headset on and his wife does not have the headset, in the meta version, that's the end of story. In the Apple version today, if Mike were to look at his wife, or his wife starts talking to him, his eyes start to appear through this display. So there's some thoughtfulness to allowing two people in the same physical space to connect through the technology, as opposed to it being a barrier. It's still very early and looks kind of alien-like, but that type of thoughtfulness, what's called the Maya design product concept, the most advanced yet acceptable, is going to be needed to make the big breakthrough. We think in any consumer device, it needs to be adoptable in a way that's not such a big leap. There's always the early tech adopters, but everyone wants to get past the early tech adopters, the early majority.
Yeah, echoing the need for real problem solving, as well as negative consequences that could emerge from these technologies. It's great to see that Sly and Nadia, both of you are addressing the real world problems such as mental health or community. We have a question that just came through from the audience. Can one of you address your perspective on the importance of standards and open interoperability, especially when it comes to augmented reality?
A lot of experience in the early days of mobile trying to build some common framework without delivering the lowest common denominator, a bunch of devices that had nothing in common with each other. They were competing with each other on features. And the standardization that Apple and Android brought into the industry, I think, was really fundamental to driving a lot of the innovation. We haven't hit that inflection point yet. However, platforms like Unity and Unreal Engine do make it easier to enter the space than we saw in the earlier days of mobile. So I think that the standardization is really a key element. We do have to address some of the comfort issues still around the device profile itself, and that's why I'm a big proponent of how do we start really interfacing sooner than later with cloud-based interactions and the like. On the specific use case for our company and trying to address some of the concerns around regulatory or just even negative impact that could potentially emerge. We are very active in a lot of the ethics committees, especially even just on the evolution of how the FDA will ultimately approve content that is personalized in real time based on AI and different bio signal detection. Their framework is not quite ready for that yet, but the good news is that they're talking about it and inviting business representatives to participate in that conversation. So it's not just emerging from clinicians, et cetera, who have never really built a live service, which is what a digital therapeutic ultimately will be. On the consumer wellness side for us, we try to have a humble approach to our development, especially since trust is our biggest brand attribute, especially to be able to garner the trust from gamer dudes as our primary early audience was really, I think, it put a heavy onus on us to show up with details on how we handle data, how we personalize content and how we support our users and make them feel heard and also part of the development of it. So I think that it's important to build the community around the business. Companies, I was just at a conference yesterday with a lot of virtual reality healthcare professionals because, we can share information to help support each other. Do I think the government should step in and regulate right away? We haven't seen a lot of innovation emerge when they do that. So I think, I personally am a proponent of open sourcing a lot of this stuff because I think the free market will support those who act ethically and with standards, with some participation of guardrails
Right.
on the framework. I don't think the early people at Facebook thought that they were going to destroy teenage girls' mental health when they started to think about how to, apply algorithms to the feed. And I'll end with this one thought, which is, the image of being in the headset while your wife is watching live TV. I've found my boyfriend and I each looking at our phones, sitting together in the living room we have personalized feeds. And I do see a future where we're going to have hyper personalized content that's created to exactly who we are and what we respond to. I think that is fraught with a lot of landmines as well, and on the impact on people's mental health and well-being. We've seen just even the young people, in my life, we grew up with on-demand content, very different than having to wait all year to see Charlie Brown Christmas, and what on-demand did to change us. So there's definitely a lot of conversation that communities like this, whether they're investors and entrepreneurs, but also some of the government entities, we work with the VA very closely. Knowledge sharing and communication is really important.
I said that is a great place to end our discussion of many possibilities in this new technology, but also some problems that we should definitely think about moving forward. With that, we're about time. So thank you very much for your time, Nania, Sly, and Mike, and also your invaluable insights. I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us today. And just a final reminder that if you're interested in learning more about the Deep Tech Fund, please don't hesitate to reach out with questions. Thank you very much.